Let's turn our focus to Australia's housing market. A lot of bad signs within the economy around consumer confidence. One of them apparently is not in housing. Joining us now is Eliza Owen, Head of Australian Research at CoreLogic. Eliza, thanks very much for your time. The story continues from last year into this year for the first month of 2020 with the housing market, but well, it's not so much a rebound now, but getting back up towards those record levels.
That's right. It's continued momentum across the housing market. Nationally, we saw that dwelling values are up by 0.9% in January, and that's driven by the usual suspects of Sydney and Melbourne, 1.1% growth across Sydney, 1.2% in Melbourne. But I guess a couple of things to note about the acceleration we're seeing is that momentum has slowed down a bit in our major cities, and the rest of the capital cities have started to see some spillover of demand. So every capital city market saw an increase, but sort of momentum slowing in the larger markets.
Right, so we'll probably see some of those increases drop off as a result. And the other factor we've talked about a lot is how much is actually going on in terms of supply. Is the demand being tested much with supply going back on? Are sellers confident again yet?
So supply has been moderating in a lot of markets where there's been high levels of unit supply, for example. So Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, we've seen levels moderating since about 2017. So it really is a combination of that supply slowing down off the back of a downturn. And now that we've seen further cuts to the cash rate, further confidence around negative gearing and capital gains concessions, and more owner-occupiers getting into the market, there has been that surge in demand relative to a kind of paucity in supply in the last couple of years.
The conversation about housing not that long ago was all about complete unaffordability. Then it became, how big is this correction going to be? I note now we're only 2.2% off that peak. How much is affordability becoming a dominant issue again out there?
Housing affordability is definitely going to come back as a major issue in 2020, considering that in Melbourne, for example, prices are only about 1.2% off their peak, not far in Sydney. But I think that's also a function of why we're starting to see growth rates slow down in those major cities. Meanwhile, we saw in the Perth market, for example, where prices are still 20% below their peak from 2014, we're actually starting to see demand pick up. Similarly with Adelaide, which is more a slow and steady market, but relatively affordable, that showed positive growth over the month as well.
All right, so maybe Perth is the bargain spot for now. Eliza Owen from CoreLogic, thanks for your time.
Thank you.